Less than 10 months ago, I was a total beginner at Counter-Strike. Since then, I've climbed to 2,500 face to elo, which puts me in the top 0.6% of players in my region.
I just juked me now, standing.
Back mid one. T-box. Bro, he's just ADing on me and kills me.
During this, I noticed countless mistakes that players of all elos make. I'm going to share with you the 10 biggest mistakes I saw along the way. But first, a word from today's sponsor.
Bro, what the f?
A lot of players do without even really knowing it is overcommitting to duels. The single easiest way to almost guarantee a death is to overcommit to a losing fight. An example of a losing fight is being an E-box in Anubis and swinging Canal. First off, if you're swinging this angle at the start of the round without an op or any utility, you're wrong. But let's say we're halfway through a round and you decide to peek E-box for info and you see a T and you're just unable to kill them. Your immediate reaction should not be to re-swing the same angle you just peeked. Depending on the situation, there's nothing wrong with simply gathering the information and living. Think about it like this. Depending on your timing to re-swing, 3 things can happen. 1. The enemy will know your position and place their crosshair exactly where you're about to swing and ultimately kill you. 2. They'll tell their friend, once peeking E-box, and their teammate T-stairs will look towards you and kill you, in which the best case scenario you'll get 1 and then get traded. 3. Somehow the enemy isn't prepared for you to re-swing, nor are their teammates, and you get the kill. The higher elo you climb, the less likely scenario 3 will play out. Even if you're not getting punished for this now, eventually as you climb, you absolutely will. If you're dead set and wanting to re-peek this angle, you could at the very least throw a flash and try to blind anyone Canal before re-swinging. However, the highest percentage play in this scenario is to just smoke off E-box, communicate with your team about your newly found information, and then play accordingly. Swinging too wide in any other scenario than a 1v1 will likely expose you to more than one enemy. This is something that I struggled with for a long time and had to spend a lot of time practicing to fix. Of course, there are going to be instances where you absolutely should swing wide. For example, as an entry player, you should swing as wide as you can to create space for your team to take sight. Even if you die, your team will likely be able to trade you and get plant because of it. A scenario where you should never swing wide is when the Ts are rushing your site and there are several enemies in the same location. To your best ability, try and isolate these fights to reduce the chance of you getting traded by the enemy team. Something that I did to help practice this for T-side was playing pre-fire maps. In a player disadvantaged situation where you can't afford to be traded, or in 2v2 situations when your teammate is not around, you should clear angles in a way that the enemy is forced into 1v1 situations. Playing pre-fire maps will help you better understand not only where the enemies could be and where your crosshairs should be, but also improve your ability to not wide swing angles when you shouldn't be. The number one greatest resource in Counter-Strike is information. The easiest way to gather information is by listening to the actions made by the enemy team. Whether they're throwing utility, moving, or shooting their gun, all these things should create somewhat of a blueprint in your mind to where they're all at. With this in mind, it's important to know that all these things are also being used against you. The information you provide the enemy team when you rotate early to another bomb site without walking could be the difference between a round won or a round lost. Another key example of this is during 1v1 situations. All too often while I was climbing, I saw players who would reveal their position which would otherwise be unknown by throwing a piece of utility. Next time you're in a 1v1, consider if the enemy really knows where you're at. And even if there's reasonable evidence or lack thereof about your position, don't give this information away for free. This same principle applies to almost all scenarios. Let's say you're in a 2v2 situation on CT side. The enemy team just found out there's at least one player on B. You're holding mid, decide to HE underpass and attempt to damage the enemy. What you just did was provide enough information to the enemy that there's no one on A. Understanding small things like this will take you from an average player to a great player. Think carefully about the information you're providing to the enemy, and think about their actions based on the information that's been given to them. I briefly mentioned this in my last video, but it really is something that almost everyone in lower elo does wrong, and that is to play the bomb. As a T, once the bomb is planted, your newly found objective went from securing a site to ensuring the bomb explodes. With this in mind, your goal should be to make it as difficult as possible for the CTs to retake site. What I saw a lot of players would do would be undervaluing their life post-plant and taking unfavorable fights with the CTs, which in most cases would result in a much easier retake for them. Like I mentioned in my last video, there should be a few things you always do post-plant. First would be to take note of where the bomb is being planted. And if you're the one planting, ensure your team knows where the bomb is being planted. Second, take the necessary space required to make post-plant as easy as possible for you and your team. A good example of this would be on Anubis. When the bomb is planted, and if it's default, you should 100% make sure your team maintains control of B main. There's hardly any situation more difficult to be in for the CTs if the bomb is planted for main in a 1v1 and there is a T patiently waiting in main for you to try to defuse the bomb. Side note to this, if you're playing Anubis on T side, please, for the love of God, stop always planting default. If your team has control of dark, plant in front of E-box so your team can have 2 powerful positions to play from post-plant. This is a more widely known topic, but it's really important to mention. If your goal is to improve at Counter-Strike and all you're doing is playing matches, you're really not doing yourself any favors. If you want to improve quickly, you need to start spending time practicing the mechanics that you're bad at. whether it be your aim, recoil control, throwing utility, or just overall game sense. You need to be doing things outside of a match to help yourself improve. If you solely rely on playing games to improve each one of your mechanics, then your rate of improvement will be much slower. The main reason why I improved as fast as I did was because I was consistent with my practice. I would shoot 1,000 bots a day, deathmatch for at least 1 hour, practice my recoil for 10 minutes, and then do my favorite KZ map. I know this sounds like a lot, and to be honest, all of that really isn't necessary to improve at any rate, but the more work you put in, the more results that you'll see. What's most important is that you find something that fits your gaming schedule and then just remain consistent with it. If this isn't something you've already been doing, after a month of doing this, you'll be completely surprised with how fast you improve. Tilt is by far the hardest thing to fix, and regardless of what anyone tries to tell you, it does indeed affect everyone. This is something that I struggled with early on in my journey. There is nothing more frustrating than losing a game because of AFK teammates, griefers, and most notably, your own performance. These kinds of things would lead me to make terrible decisions in-game that I was honestly blind to. My honest advice for managing tilt is to first recognize it. Realizing you're pissed off of the game is the first step in reducing its effect on your elo. As hard as it sounds, the easiest way to remedy this is to just take a break, whether it be just for a few minutes, an hour, or even a day. The absolute worst thing you can do to yourself is expose yourself to more losses. There is a low chance you'll perform well when your mind isn't in the right state to play. Not to mention the effect that this can have on your mental health as well. 90% of Counter-Strike is mental. If we were all to be on a level playing field as far as skill goes, those who would be the best in the world would be the ones who can manage their emotions when they play. If you have somewhat of a ritual you have whenever you're playing CT, regardless of the position, you're likely doing something wrong. Of course, there's always going to be protocol utility that you should throw at the start of each round, like playing Banana on Inferno. When you start the round, you should pretty much always throw your Molotov and HE down Banana to prevent T's from taking early control. But after you do this, if you do the same thing each round, like standing here next to Car, you're making it as easy as possible for the enemy team to recognize this and start pre-firing you. That or just start HE stacking you every round. You need to make it impossible for the enemy team to guess where you're at each round. Start mixing in off angles. Early contest Banana sometimes, then other times late take Banana with your teammate. Maybe chain smokes to deny access to site other rounds. Regardless of what your approach is, how you play and where you play each round should change to make it as difficult as possible for the enemy team. If you made it this far into the video, I want to personally thank you for sticking around. If you like what you see, be sure to give the video a like. It really does help for the YouTube algorithm. Anyway, on to number 8. The easiest fix that you can start with today is stop making terrible money decisions on eco rounds. Your goal on an eco round should be to try to find a creative way to steal a round, but it should also be to ensure that for the next round you have a reasonable buy. This is something that isn't just in lower elos, but also in a lot of my level 10 games as well. The only people that I always see make good decisions with their economy are very high elo players and pro players. An example of this would be on T side. If you have 2,700 and the third loss in a row will net you 2,400, you should be saving your entire bank outside of maybe buying one flash. A full loadout on T-side will cost you 4,900, which should be your goal to have going into the next round. But if you do decide you want to buy pistol, it's important to know that you'll be likely sacrificing utility for the next round, which will greatly impact your probability of winning. Please, for the love of God, don't be the teammate who only buys AK full armor after each eco. Utility wins rounds. I don't care what anyone has to say about it. Sure, at low levels of play you can get away with not buying any utility and probably just be fine, but anything past that, utility is king. And the higher elo you get, the more it will matter. Not spending time learning smoke lineups, working on the ability for you to pop flash for yourself or for your teammates, or simply not practicing the trajectory of nades will hurt your climb tremendously. At this point in my climb, if I can't afford a full belt of utility with an AK, I'd much rather opt for a glow with a full belt. The likelihood of us losing a round because I have a glow rather than an AK is insignificant compared to the likelihood of us losing because I don't have any utility. Regardless of the weapon you have, if the enemy is blind, burning, or 30 HP from a well-placed HE, it won't matter whether I have an AK or a glow. They're going to lose. I know demo reviewing sounds incredibly boring, and honestly it's not easy to get yourself to do. But the honest to God truth why I was able to improve as fast as I did was because I demo reviewed. During demos, you can see all the mistakes you made and have all the time in the world to think through your decision-making process to discover your flaws. If you have a coach to help you with this, then that's a big plus, but even without one, it's still beneficial. If I were to never watch a demo review during my climb, I'm extremely doubtful I'd be able to climb as fast as I did. And if you're skeptical, I challenge you to just try it. After a few demos and some time, you'll be blown away with how fast you'll improve. That was my 10 mistakes that players make, and before I end the video, I want to shout out all the Ride or Die YouTube members. You guys are awesome and give me all the motivation to keep making content and also improve the content I do release. And also, if you're looking for a community to join where you can find like-minded players to queue with, you should check out the Ride or Die Discord. There you can find skin giveaways, participate in 10-mans, stay up to date with my live streams, and find people to play with. But that's all I got. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like. And if you want to stay up to date with my content, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified. Thanks for watching.